Hello，你好，欢迎回来，Welcome back to Wisdom Wednesday. Yeah, Wisdom Wednesday. I like totally went blank there. Yeah. Wednesday. It's July 19, 2023, and we got Kitten hiding behind the camera.
Hello, everyone.
你好.
你好.
So, never mind you. Little alarm clock want to chime in. You guys should be getting a nice view today. I think it's like about ready for sunset out there. So you guys should get some really, really good view. Uh, wish I could see it. That's a bit depressing. Anyway, um, today we are going to talk about the long and sad history, the origin of pretty much of dieting in Chinese history. Now, some people might think Chinese people are so small, why would you need to diet? Now, I think Kitten and I both have come to know this. Like, just because you're small doesn't always mean you're fit, right? No, a lot of times, like, there are a lot of small people, but their body fat is like 95%.
Yeah.
Right. And just because you're big and heavy doesn't mean that you're necessarily like fat. In fact, through today's story, you guys will probably get a new appreciation on fat people. Um, but we'll get there eventually, because I do tend to ramble on a lot. Now, before we get into today's story, let me give you guys a couple of vocabularies that will be uh, kind of useful and it's trendy. Now, when it comes to dieting, in Mandarin, diet or dieting, the action of dieting is 减肥, that's Jian, 肥 Fay. 那减 means reduction, 肥 means fat. So fat reduction, literally. 减肥 means diet. 肥胖 means fat. When you say someone 肥胖, fat. Uh, 肥, like I said, means fat. 胖 means uh, big, uh, girthy, hefty. The 肥胖 is used to describe someone uh, who is bigger, who is fat. Now, I believe that we have done an episode before where I showed you guys that in Chinese culture, the whole expectation and connotation around being fat is actually not as negative as in other cultures. Like primarily in Chinese culture, if you run into a friend or an elder and they tell you, "Hey, you look good, you look fat," don't get offended. That's actually a good thing. In this culture, in the Chinese culture, being fat is a sign of wealth and health and prosperity. If someone say, "Oh, you look skinny," that's bad. If you meet the elder and the elder say, "Oh, you look kind of skinny," that means they think that you don't look very good. You might be sick. You might be on drug or something like that. So there is a kind of a different connotation and meaning when it comes to uh, being fat and stuff like that in Chinese culture. On a similar thread, I'll give you guys one more vocabulary, although you want to be careful with this one. Um, in Taiwan, China, Hong Kong, a lot of time you will hear someone call people 胖子, uh, and that's basically a Mandarin for fatso, fatty. But again, because being fat is more accepted in the Chinese culture, the calling someone 胖子 is actually okay for for a lot of people. Now, some people obviously can ha might have PTSD, or some people might have some trigger, a bad feeling associated being called 胖子. But most of the time, in Chinese culture, Taiwanese culture, calling someone 胖子 is It's just like calling someone, hey man, hey dude, hey bro, something like that. It doesn't have a malicious intent behind it. Um, like when you if you read Chinese literature, Chinese uh, books, and watch Chinese movies, you will often hear someone refer to someone as Li Pangzi, that's Fatso Li, or Wang Pangzi, Fatty Wang, and you might think, oh, that's so mean. But no, they're not doing that to be mean. It's totally okay in that culture. Because again, there's not that negative connotation tied to being fat. With that said, finally we're getting to it. With that said, it is not always like that. There have been uh, cultures, on and off cultures of dieting and skinny people and fashion and all that stuff as far back as the beginning of Chinese history. So dieting is not just a modern thing. Dieting has been a thing throughout Chinese history. And why is my background playing Lady Gaga? That is like so weird to have like erhu Chinese instrument doing Lady Gaga. Just pretend you guys didn't hear that. It's traditional music from 5,000 years ago. How's that?
Moving on.
I hate it when he does that to me.
Yeah.
It's like so weird. Um, so how far back can we go? Today I'm going to tell you guys about the origin. The guy who at least according to historical evidence, the guy who was the first to force people to diet, the first guy who ushered in the dieting trend, you can say. So we go way back to the chaotic period of spring and autumn, the spring and autumn period in Chinese history. So this is roughly 2,800 years ago, 2,700, 2,800 years ago, before the Great Wall, before the Yellow River, before the Great River, before a lot of these, what you now know as China. Because back then it was not China. Back then China was not a country. Back then China was splintered into um, like 20, 30 different small nations, small countries, small kingdoms. So the other day, I was talking to a friend who said, Chinese history is kind of like the Game of Thrones TV show, where you have different like factions and lords and knights and different castles fighting each other. And I said, yeah, where do you think in the Game of Thrones and people like that get the idea from? Because it is true. If you look back into ancient Chinese history, like the period of spring and autumn and the romance of the Three Kingdom period, uh, a lot of those periods were just like what you see in your fantasy novels, your fantasy TV shows, where people from different kingdoms try to betray each other, backstab each other, kill each other, and murder each other for the throne, and make alliances and make wedding plans, and then kill each other during their wedding, and like a lot of that kind of stuff going on. So going back to the period of spring and autumn, like I said, about 2,800, 2,700 years ago, uh, one of these small kingdoms was called the Kingdom of Chu. This is not me trying to get at my friend who has the last name Chu. Really was the Kingdom of Chu. I swear, I didn't do this just to just to get at some, purely coincidence. Um, Now, if some of you wonder how small these kingdoms were. Like, how the heck do you squeeze 30 kingdoms into China? Uh, Literally, anyone who could get 3 or 4 villages to follow him or her could call themselves a kingdom back then. Because there's no uh, united alliance, there's no united front. So imagine if you are in California. I'm using California because Kitten is here, so she know what I'm talking about. Imagine if you're back then the mayor of Hawthorne would be the kingdom, Hawthorne Kingdom, and then uh, like Disney can be a Disney Kingdom, Hollywood can be a Hollywood Kingdom. So like anyone, like any Tom, Dick, and Harry could proclaim themselves being a king or queen if they had a couple of villages following them. So going back to the kingdom of Chu, the kingdom of Chu had this king by the name of Chu Ling. Now that's not actually his real name. A lot of time when this is a kind of a side little knowledge for you guys, when you read Chinese history and you read about uh, the so and so martial emperor, so and so Chu Ling, or so and so Wu Di, so and so Xi Huang, those were not actually their name. Okay, these were titles for the emperor to set them apart from their predecessors and their successors. And these were names put there, these were titles put there long after they're dead. And a lot of time you can actually immediately tell which emperor was good and which emperor were bad. Any emperor that had the word wu or wen uh, or shi in their name were really powerful, really good, successful emperors. But emperors that end up with words like lin or yu or yuan, these words, they were usually pieces of shit, basically. Like, these were
Oh,
shitty emperors. Like, if historians put these words in their name, then it already tell you this guy is quite an a-hole, quite a jerk. And so, true to that naming convention, Chu Ling, the King Chu Ling of Chu Kingdom, you already know because he got a Ling in his name, is wasn't a very good guy. Um, how much wasn't he a good guy? Well, let me put it to you this way. Um, Originally, the throne belonged to his older brother, Chu Feng, and one day, Chu Feng got a really bad bout of flu and was bedridden, and his younger brother Chu Ling went to visit him, and while Chu Feng was laying in bed, could barely breathe because of coughing too much, Chu Ling held a pillow over his face and killed him.
oh my
And that's how Chu Ling became king, by murdering his older brother. Um, a little side story, the very, very interesting side story of King Chu Ling was his interaction with the ambassador from the kingdom of Kai. The kingdom of Kai was a bigger kingdom, a neighboring kingdom, and so they sent one of their ambassadors over to the kingdom of Chu. This ambassador was a very, very famous minister of the time who made a lot of alliances, signed a lot of papers, united a lot of people. His name was Yanzi. Yanzi basically means flying swallow. Cool name, huh? Yeah. Usually these good guys get really cool names. Now Yanzi wasn't really a impressive looking guy. He was super, super small. He was like almost like a midget, according to historical record. So when Yanzi first came to the kingdom of Shu to try to get them to unite with the kingdom of Kai, uh, King Chuling decided to humiliate Yanzi. So
Oh.
he ordered his people to close the palace gate and open up a little pet door. And he said to Yanzi, if you want to talk to me, you got to go through that, you got to come in through that pet door. And get down, crawl in like a dog. Now, this is one example of how clever Minister Yanzi was. Did he get mad? No. Yanzi did not get mad. Yanzi crawled through the dog door and stood up and dusted off his robe, and he said to King Chulin, "Hey, yeah, it makes sense. I totally understand. After all, when you visit people, you get to walk through people's door. When you visit dogs, you crawl through dog doors." King Chulin was so mad, but
Touche.
he couldn't do anything about it because he's an ambassador from a stronger kingdom. He couldn't just up and kill this guy. So okay, he decided, fine, I'm going to get you. I'm like totally going to get you. So he hatched another little scheme to try to embarrass Yanzi. He gathered uh, he gathered together all the really tall people in his court, and he invited Yanzi to the banquet. And he said to Yanzi, I thought you guys are like some big kingdom. I thought you kingdom of Kai. I thought you guys are like great warriors. How come you are so small? How come you are smaller than women? Again, Yanzi did not even get mad. Yanzi stood up and responded with, "Oh, didn't you know? We only send big people to worthy kingdoms that we visit, and we while the kingdoms that are not worthy, we send small people like me."
Another
You would
point.
you would think King Chulin would learn his lesson by this time, but nope, he gave it another try. Next day, he brought together all the criminals that they caught that were originally from the kingdom of Kai. They brought them in front of Yanzi, and he said, "Look, look, you guys are obviously like a kingdom of criminals because look at these guys. They're thieves and murderers and no good for nothing. They're in my kingdom causing mayhem. They commit crimes in my country. So what do you have to say about that? You guys are probably all like that. You're all criminals." And Yanzi said, "Oh, Your Majesty, I don't know what to tell you. They were great warriors and really good citizens when they were back in our country. So if they come to your country and have to become criminals, then the problem obviously lie in your country."
Another three-pointer.
Needless to say, Yanzi was probably like the best lawyer throughout history because you just can't argue with that guy. And after that third attempt, King Chuling gave up trying to humiliate him because it just wasn't going to work. Now, this was me digressing into the side story of King Chuling and Yanzi because it is a fascinating, humorous story. But what I really want to tell you guys is King Chuling was the first ever king in Chinese history that got people into dieting. Uh, Maybe King Chuling was a very small guy himself. Maybe King Chuling has some kind of mental block against big people. But one day, just seemingly totally random, King Chuling decided that for us to have our meetings and all the ministers and generals and high ranking guys looking fat and big and clumsy and like looking like big bullies, it's bad for our image. So he made a decree that anyone who wanted to work for the imperial government have to be under a certain weight. This created a problem because back then, we're talking about almost 3,000 years ago, people didn't know how fat worked. People didn't know how body worked. So when the king said, the only way you will be allowed to work for the government, the only way for you to to hold on to your rank is if you are under, let's say, 90 pounds. Well, crap, you know, let's say you're like 150 pounds. That's not really big, but to get down to 90 pounds, that's quite a challenge, especially when there's no Weight Watcher back then. So these people that work for the military, work for the government, they did the only thing they knew how to do. They started only eating one meal a day. And because they were only eating one meal a day, they were cranky and angry. So their servants were only allowed to eat one meal a day. And their servants' family were only allowed to eat one meal a day. And next thing you know, almost the entire kingdom is on this big trend of only eating one meal a day. So contrary to a lot of people thinking that diet was a device made to demean women, in Chinese history anyway, it started with men. It started with these imperial generals and ministers that were commanded by the king to lose weight. However, pretty soon, a big problem started happening. What is this big problem? Here you have an entire kingdom of people only eating one meal a day, getting down to under like 100 pound, 90 pound. The neighboring kingdom, they were eating 3 meals a day. They're like 6 feet tall. They're like 250 pounds. So what do you think is going to happen when there's any kind of war, any kind of engagement? The kingdom of Chu was getting their ass kicked. They couldn't defend themselves on the battlefield. Most of the people were so weak and malnourished that they could barely stand up on their buggies and chariot. And even when they try to get on and off of their horses, they have to be helped by people because they were so weak. You would think that King Chuling would realize that his error and revert his order, but he didn't. King Chuling did the next crazy thing. He commanded to have a tower built, and this tower still exists today. It's called the Tower of Three Rests. Why is it called the Tower of Three Rests? Because back when it was built, it was the tallest tower in the kingdom, and it was rumored that when you want to climb to the top of the tower, you have to rest 3 times before you can get to the top. That's how high it was. Now, personally, I'm a little bit skeptical about that because when everyone's only eating one meal a day, imagine they didn't have a lot of energy. So I think if you give them three square meals a day and proper exercises, they probably wouldn't have to rest 3 times to get to the top of the tower. And that's anyway, that's just my speculation. What did he use this tower for? Was it for warfare? Was it for be able to see far away? No. King Chuling uh, got all the skinniest women in his entourage, in his concubine, and put them in that tower and forced them to dance for him every day. So this tower was also called the Tower of Small Waisted Women because all the skinny women, the skinniest of the skinny women in his palace, got put in that tower and forced to dance and perform every day. What happened to King Chuling? Well, this is where karma does work. Eventually, his dictatorship and his idea of starvation, of dieting, forcing people to starve themselves, caused a massive riot. So one day, when King Chuling was out hunting, his third youngest brother murdered his entire family
Oh my
and took the throne. And King Chuling was left out there in the forest all on his own. He wasn't allowed back in the palace. He was forced to endure days and days of starvation so he would know what he put his people through. In the end, he committed suicide in the forest, hungry and alone. Now, this was not the only instance of craziness around dieting in Chinese history. This was the first documented large scale dieting in Chinese history. However, if we fast forward about 1,000 years, uh, in the Jing dynasty, in the Jing dynasty, there's a scholar by the name of Wang Rong who uh, actually forced his son to diet, and that also led to tragedy. Um, to stepping off to the side for a little bit, if you guys didn't know this, the Jin dynasty in Chinese history, in the 5,000 years of Chinese history, the Jin dynasty had produced the most good-looking guys. Okay, if you guys want to look up artworks and depictions of people throughout Chinese history, you will notice that Jin dynasty produced the most super model, like male model, bodybuilding, like glorious, angelic looking guys and girls. And because that is sadly because Jin Dynasty was when people again was really hooked on this whole dieting idea, and they were using all kind of uh, pills and herbs and things that they could eat to help them diet. Some of these things contain a lot of mercury, which, as some of you know, you start eating mercury, you start dying in a very painful way, and your body will start wasting away, and you think you're dieting, you're losing weight, but it's your body breaking down. So Jin Dynasty was when people really got into mass dieting, and the whole body image, the whole idea around how skinny a person have to be was so unrealistic that one of the most famous scholar in Jin Dynasty, by the name of Wang Rong, uh, decided that he had to make his son go on a diet. Wang Rong was one of those super good looking, super skinny, super tall, angelic looking, super like male model kind of guy. But his son happened to be a chunky boy. His son was, not like super fat, but definitely a lot chunkier than the standard of the time. So Wang Rong decided that his son Wang Shui should go on a diet. So he forbade his son to eat any rice. He said his son should not eat rice. His son could eat nothing but porridge until he lost weight. Unfortunately, as some of you would also know, porridge is the kind of thing that will fill you up, but you don't get hardly any nutrient because it's mostly water. You're getting full because it's a lot of water, but you're not getting much nutrient. So you can't survive on that. Again, people back then did not know that. So Wang Rong forced Wang Shui, his son, to eat nothing but porridge day in and day out. And by the time Wang Shui was 19 years old, he died of starvation.
Oh no.
And the sad part was when he died, he was still a chunky kid. Never lost weight because when you fill yourself up with like porridge and stuff like that, it carb and water, and it's not going to make you lose inches. You just look really bloated. So the poor kid got starved to death, and they because they didn't know how to properly go about the dieting. This kind of stories happen many, many, many times throughout Chinese history. Most of the time, it's emperors and kings and queens uh, forcing people to diet to fit some kind of image, some kind of ideal in their mind. But as we seen in the case of the Chu kingdom, you start dieting, you start forcing your people to lose weight, you start losing battle because you know big guy beats small guy. That's just how things work. So hopefully, this episode, long-winded as it is, will make some of us feel a little bit more vindicated, feel more okay about carrying around a few extra pounds uh, on our belly, on our arms, on our legs. After all, as long as you feel healthy, as long as you are healthy, who cares? Thank you for checking out today's Wisdom Wednesday, and we'll be back again tomorrow for Toy Thursday. Uh, Kitten and I will go look for something to eat and fatten ourselves up some more. For now, 谢谢 and 再见。
谢谢，再见。